We create more content as a society every 3 hours than we did from the beginning of time to 2003 combined.
Welcome to UpTech Report. This is our Applied Tech series. UpTech Report is sponsored by Terraleap. Learn how to leverage the power of video at terraleap.io. Today, I'm excited to be joined by my guest, Tarek Kamil, who's based in Cincinnati, Ohio. He's the CEO and founder at Cerkl. Welcome, Tarek. Good to have you on.
Alexander, good to talk to you.
Absolutely. Now, Cerkl is an employee communications suite. So for those out there, particularly I guess in the HR side, it's the internal communications that's happening in mid-market enterprise companies. So 500 plus employees is really your sweet spot. This could be a tool you're going to want to check out. But help me understand, Tarek, what's the problem that you saw in the marketplace and have set out to solve?
Great question. So I think if we think broadly about what we're doing with corporations and their workforce, there's a much broader problem, which if I go all the way back, it starts really in 2007 with the introduction of the iPhone. So what happened in 2007, iPhone comes out and all of a sudden you've got this device in your hand that gives anyone access to you at any time. And what that did, combined with the emergence of social media, so Facebook taking off, Twitter taking off, YouTube taking off, we have so much content coming at us now, more than we have ever had. The statistic that I think crystallized for me how big of an issue we're dealing with is the fact that we create more content as a society every 3 hours than we did from the beginning of time to 2003 combined. So if you think about that and what that means, so from 9 a.m. to lunch today, we will have created more than every book, album, music recording, movie, everything ever created from the beginning of time to 2003, we will eclipse that in 3 hours. And that is getting shorter and shorter. And so fundamentally, when you ask about what is the problem, it really boils down to this idea of us not being in the information age. I don't think that's where we are. I think we are in the attention age. How do you really get someone's attention? And that was fundamentally what I was seeing as a core problem. And could we use technology to address the issue?
The attention age. I love it. So for those who have been listening along with our series for a while, you know, we love both the technology, but also the business and the journey that you've been on. So I'd love to hear a bit more. Let's take a step back. We'll come back to the technology and how you guys are solving this. But where did this begin for you? Have you always just loved communication and technology? Like, what's your journey?
I've always loved technology. And so my backstory is, I started writing software at a very young age. I love technology, but only when it makes sense. How can we use it to make people's lives better? And I think back to Uncle Ben in Spider-Man, where he tells Peter Parker, with great power comes great responsibility. And I feel like that is how we should be viewing technology. It shouldn't just use it to use it. Use it when we can really add value to people's lives. So that's been my backstory. And no, I did not know anything about employee communication, internal communication. Was really in the beginning just looking for a way to drive engagement with the parents, alumni, and community for my children's school. That was it. How can I get more people engaged with what is going on around education? So that's where it began. It was really a pet project of mine, kind of nights and weekends of, could we use technology in a meaningful way to increase engagement by increasing relevancy to the recipient? And what I mean by that is, if you think about most communication, even how it's still done today, is very much one size fits all. So they'll have a mailing list, they'll send it out, the same thing to 10,000 people. Well, there's so many issues with this. So if you think about how we communicate, and one of the fundamental architectural flaws of email, for example, it is a snapshot in time. So if I were to put something together and I wanted to send it out to my entire mailing list of 10,000 people, I put it together, I am guessing what's the subject line that will resonate with the biggest percentage of people to get them to open. What should the lead story be? What's the second story? What's the right order? When should I send this, right? How frequently? What day? What time? What language? Why are we always assuming everything needs to be in English, right? And so then you hit send. So you've made so many assumptions. I've given you a list of 20 assumptions you have already made. You're trying to engage a diverse group of 10,000 people, and you hit send. Well, now you're praying. I hope they open it. I hope they receive it. And then what happens to the person that is added to your audience next week? How will they ever see what you sent today? Or the person that's added a month from now? It's because email is so static, right? It's a shot in time. So I might subscribe, let's say, to your newsletter a week from now. And the most interesting thing that you could have told me, you've already sent out. How will I ever see this? So there's just fundamentally how we've communicated historically, I think, has been flawed. So my goal was, why don't we flip it? Instead of it being from the organization's perspective, why can't we make it from the recipient's perspective? And that is really what Netflix is doing for you, right? When you log into Netflix, it's about you. It's your perspective. Amazon, Hulu, Spotify, they all work the same way. So my thesis was, why can't communication follow that same paradigm? That's really was the next step of, I think we can drive engagement and relevancy by flipping who is at the center of this conversation. It should be the recipient.
Because up to this point, you're stating basically how people often communicate is time-based. This is the most recent thing, take a look at it. But what needs to flip is it needs to be based on that person's interest and what's relevant to them, hence Netflix. I feel like you had mentioned, you said this started with the school parents, the school board. You're sending things out and people are like, I didn't know this event was happening. And they would have been interested, but it was just embedded down in many other communications that were going out. Is that right? Is that where that first initial experience was?
Yeah, I feel like and maybe I'm projecting my past, but when I was in school, the things that really mattered to me is when things that were out of the ordinary. Field trips, right? You still remember field trips that you went on in elementary school because it's out of the ordinary. When we would have speakers come in from the outside world and talk to us, I remember those. And so my thinking was, how could we engage the community in a way that we can get more kids activated? And the communication that we were sending is very much one size fits all. Here are the 50 things going on. And people just don't have the attention span to read through a list of 50 things. If one of those or zero of those apply to them, we are now training them that this is not going to be a good use of your time. And so what's happening is subconsciously, if you think about your own inbox, it's probably like my inbox. There are things that you need to open right away because they're super relevant to you. For past history, you know that this is going to be a good use of your time, but then there's other things that are not very relevant, or sometimes they are. Those get put on the back burner. And if you look at your inbox and say, how many unopened emails do I have? I think for most people, it is a huge number. And this is why. This is exactly why that is a huge number. Because they are shouting. These organizations are shouting and praying that you're going to open their correspondence.
Yeah.
That's not where we are anymore.
You started 2013, the organization officially got started, and you were focused on, was Cerkl at the very beginning focused on the educational space?
Yes. Yeah. So in the beginning, this was never intended to be a business. In the beginning, I just wanted to solve this engagement issue. And so I originally built it for my children's school. And then I took this concept that I'd created and I went to all these school districts and I said, I've created this thing for you. It's free. And the whole mission of what I have built is to drive engagement to help our kids. And every single school district said no to me. I know. That was the same reaction I had.
Yeah.
It was troubling, but the reason why is they're really a monopoly. If you think about public education today, they receive the same tax dollars, whether the parents are engaged or not engaged. So there's no motivation for them to do anything different. It really is difficult. And so that's where I started to, really think about what's the right application for this technology. And the next step was really parents coming to me and saying, this is amazing. Could I use this for these other use cases, which I didn't know anything about? One of those use cases was, could we use this to communicate to our employees?
And was this in 2013 still that all this happened, or was it?
So this is probably, I started building this really in 2012 and maybe had the first version out in 2013. And then as I started to realize this thing that I built, and I was so excited to kind of transform education, really drive engagement within education, when I realized that wasn't happening, I can't get them to see what I see. That's when the parents started coming to me that were using it and saying, we love this. And they started giving me different use cases of, hey, could I use this for this purpose or this purpose or this purpose? Like, sure, yeah, of course. One of them was internal communication for a large healthcare organization in our region and 10,000 employees. And they were asking, would it be possible to use the same technology to communicate to our people? I said, I don't know. I mean, I'm not an expert in this area. The last time I worked for a big company, they were using Outlook for email and SharePoint for an intranet. And that was years and years and years ago. What are you using today? And their answer was Outlook and SharePoint. So it was a light bulb moment that there really hasn't been the same level of evolution internally with how companies talk to their people in the same way that we've seen an evolution with how companies talk to their customers, right? You hear customer experience all over the place, or prospective customers from a marketing perspective. Both of those areas have seen massive leaps and bounds maturation in terms of how we talk to people, treat people, learn about people, but it hasn't translated internally. And so that was a big light bulb moment for me that this is really the opportunity to change the world, is change how companies communicate, engage, and understand their people.
So 2012, you start building. In 2013, you finally have it. You launch it, you start sharing it, and you're like, oh, okay, these school boards don't want it. They're not going to take it. But the parents start talking to you 2013, 2014, 2015. I do notice you're on like the Cincinnati Scholarship Foundation for 2014 to 2017. So sounds like you're still in that educational space. But
yes.
I guess 2015, maybe 2016, you started to make that shift.
Yeah. So really, it's probably 15, 16, 17, where I really saw the need to transform this relationship between a company and its workforce. And so at that point, it was really taking the company and focusing on solving this one problem in a unique way.
Did you bootstrap at the beginning? Have you ever raised funding for this?
Yes, so we were bootstrapped. I'm, an engineer, so I like to build things. And my prior companies, I have bootstrapped as well. For this, we ended up raising, right now we're about $11.5 million we have raised over the course of that time. So it's really taken off recently. So we just closed a round of funding 2 weeks ago for $7 million. And a lot of that is driven because of COVID. So COVID is really driving the need for these companies to innovate and think differently about the relationship they want to have with their people.
As more and more communication has to happen digitally, and you want people to be able to actually get the information that you want them to have in an efficient way. That's where solutions like yours. Would you say, like, even to this point, that they're coming from Outlook and SharePoint, or is the entire atmosphere, everyone moving forward, or is it they're still coming from Outlook and SharePoint?
I would say the vast majority are still using Microsoft, which we don't displace that. Our goal in terms of how we work and what Broadcast, which is the name of the platform, actually does for an organization is not to displace what they've already built. It is to tie things together. It is to serve as the connective tissue given the channels that you've already made investments in. So most companies, I'd say 100% of them are using email. Maybe 80% have an intranet. Mm-hmm. You might have 10% have a mobile app for their workers. Mm-hmm. Maybe 70% are using some form of collaboration like Teams or Slack or something along those lines. So they have these channels that they've already made big investments in, and our goal is to work with what they've already built, just tie it together and modernize their existing communication channels.
Interesting. This is a reoccurring theme of I find with B2B software. As a consumer, we have an expectation from our personal side, life of experiences. And when we come into business, it often can be lacking. It can be a laggard with that technology. But in this way, you're trying to bring that same consumer grade experience inside of work.
Correct. That's exactly right. So this is becoming more and more of an issue as their workforce starts to you just have more people entering the workforce that have grown up with technology, right? So you've got now the people entering the workforce do not really remember a time without a mobile device. It's 14 years ago. So they would have gotten their first phone probably, at 8, 9, whatever. They don't know anything else. And so now they've entered the workforce. They're coming into your organization. They're used to Netflix, Spotify, Hulu, Instagram. Everybody knows me. Everything makes it about me. It's all about saving my time, making my life convenient. And now they come into a workforce and an organization where it's primarily communicating by email, which they're not used to. Everything is one size fits all. The web experience feels like it's, 1997 still. And so there is a shock to the system for your younger employees added to your workforce. They're just not used to any of this. And it really has not evolved in a long time. And so our mission is to really modernize how these companies communicate with their employees, but also engage them. And that's where the AI piece comes into play, and we can talk about that very well.
Let's dig just briefly into that technology. So you mentioned Netflix several times. I feel like the recommendation algorithms are becoming standard in most consumer grade products. So you're effectively bringing an AI component to customize the experience per employee. Can you define what does that look like? Give me an example or a story.
Sure. So there's a couple ways that we do that. So one is we just ask you, what are the kinds of things that you care about? So this is an optional step. Each employee can do it or not do it, but it is analogous to your first experience with Netflix. When you first create your account, Netflix will prompt you with shows and movies and genres and ask you, what do you like? And you might say, I really like documentaries, or I really like horror movies, or whatever. and they can immediately start making somewhat intelligent recommendations. We do the exact same thing. And then what happens is, as you engage with Netflix, it learns about your interests. And if your interests change, I might have said in the beginning, I like documentaries, but 6 months later, your interests change. You stop watching documentaries. Well, Netflix will stop recommending them to you because it sees your behavior has changed. And that's the machine learning piece of this, to make intelligent recommendations based on what you're doing today, not what you said 6 months ago or 3 years ago. So what are you doing today? So we do the same thing internally. So a good example of that might be, let's say that community service is really important to you. Not required to do your job. It's just what you are passionate about as a human being. And we can see that either based on what you've told us or based on your behavior. Oh, I see Alexander is always engaging with content around community service, what we're doing for the community. Great. So knowing that, when there is new community service types of content, that should be very high priority news for you, because it should be a tailored experience for you, built around you in the same way Netflix builds their experiences for you.
Getting slightly in the weeds, not too far, but the way those algorithms work is usually need data to be tagged properly so that it knows what's correlated to what. Is that something that you've already preset in there? Are people able to add their own, these are topics around community service, so this is topics around our marketing efforts? Help me understand your tagging system.
Yeah, so this is where we need to really blend into what they're already doing. So if we come in and we say we've got a really elegant solution to this problem, the only requirement is you have to change everything you've ever built and done. That's a non-starter. And I know that, you know that. They might love it, but they won't change because they've made such a big time investment and financial investment into what they're using today. So the way it works is really any digital content can be ingested into the system. That content can come from any source. And if they already have a taxonomy that they're using within a content management system, we just bring it over and we honor that. Great. Oh, so in SharePoint, you have a tag or a classification called community service. Great. When we ingest that content, it will still be called community service. And so that is how we really do a lot of the learning on the back end, which is they are engaging with different types of content, and we are tracking all of that. And there's really two reasons for it. One is to understand what you like and what you don't like. And the second reason is we need to know what you've consumed and what you haven't consumed. Meaning, if I show you a piece of content, let's say on the intranet, and you engage with it there, why would we show you the exact same thing in a newsletter? It's a waste of your time. We know you've already read this. Other people might not have seen it yet, so it should be included in their newsletter, but not for you, because we know you've seen it. We know when you saw it. We know the channel you saw it on. Why are these channels disconnected? So going back to Netflix, if I start watching a show on my laptop and I hit pause and I go to a TV, I pick up exactly where I left off. That is not how corporate America works. Every channel today is siloed. It's like a brand new experience every time you go to a new channel. And that is not what we expect as consumers. And it's not efficient. It is a waste of your people's time. So there's two really big problems we solve with this architecture, which is A, we want to learn what you like and what you don't like. And B, we don't want to waste your time.
Mm-hmm. Time is one of the most valuable assets we have, and being able to make sure that the right information comes at the right time. Was it a straightforward learning, building this whole machine learning element, AI component? Was it perfect all the way from inception to where you are now?
Absolutely perfect. Never any issues. Of course, no, it was I don't know, if you were looking at it, it probably looked more like a seismograph. It was all over the place. You just learn. We're just learning constantly. And so, as an entrepreneur that has been through this before, I do understand that our biggest asset is time. So you might have a thesis. I believe this to be true. Great. How can I get that answer in hours? Not days, weeks, months, or God forbid, years. How can I get this answer as fast as possible? Because I don't want to waste time. And so we've been all over the place really learning. And I think now we're at a place where we have so many customers and they do such a good job of communicating with us. And I think we do a really good job of listening to them. So it's much less now about the thesis and more about really understanding your customer in a very intimate way and seeing solutions that they can't see, but we can see their pain. So if you can communicate your pain to me, I can come up with a solution that not only helps you, but helps others. So I think that's a natural life cycle as you talk to different businesses. In the beginning, it's theory, it's testing, it's iterating. But once you find product market fit, then it's really more listening and making sure that you aren't reacting too quickly. So you're listening and you're looking for trends across your customers. What's an elegant solution that I can put in place that not only solves this problem for someone, but solves it for lots of people? And that's where it becomes tricky, because if you are too quick to just put in a solution, you might actually be overcomplicating your offering. And we definitely don't want to be there. I'm really big on user experience and product feedback and making sure the experience with the product is beautiful, one that they love and they understand and they get. So it definitely changes over time to go from testing and iterating to listening.
We have a lot of entrepreneurs and founders who listen to this series as well. So that whole concept of, there's a lot of buzz around machine learning and artificial intelligence, adding it in, but doing it right can be the difficult part, and being able to actually help and serve your clients. So that's a key piece of, it sounds like, of a lesson learned of not just implementing it too quick, but slowly with constant feedback loops.
Yes. Well, I mean, the company's name is Cerkl for a reason. So people always ask me, why did you name it that? And the answer is the idea of a feedback loop is a circle. And the way that we communicate today is very linear. So you push communication out and we leave the most valuable part of that communication on the floor, which is we're not listening to how people respond.
You made a thought just pop in my head about the fact of communication and the importance of keeping that alive. I've heard the phrase many times of you have to communicate with someone 7 times or 7 touches before they really get it. And marketing, but I'm wondering if it's the same for internal. Have you done any research or looked at it, or even have functions around frequency? Because I know you've talked about being able to remove it so they don't need to see it again, but what if people want them to see it again and again?
So it's one of the things that, as you get into this, people really, I think, understand the complexity of what marketers are trying to do. And I would say it is a complex job of digital marketing today. There is a big difference, though, between a marketing function and an internal communication function. So marketing is lots of things, but if I oversimplify it, it's Alexander, there's 20% off this weekend. No one's going to die or lose their job if you don't go to that sale. And I know it's more complicated than 20% off this weekend, but a lot of it is optional, want to know information. Well, internally, they have to deliver that. Hey, that community service project, Alexander doesn't need to know it, but he would want to know. Great, let's make sure he sees this. The big difference is within a business, they have need to know information that has to be communicated. It is not optional. You must know this to perform your job, to keep your job, to stay healthy, to stay safe. And so they have the two sides of I need to know something and I want to know something. And marketers don't really have to deal with need to know. And so that's really where we started to understand over time that the learning piece is important, but that's really around want to know information. Mm-hmm. They need to know. They need control. So going back to your question of what if an internal communicator needs an employee or a group of employees to see certain piece of content over and over, whatever the number is. So they have granular control at the content level. So they can go into the content and they can say, I need this to be available on all channels. Even if Alexander has seen it, I need this to run for the next 6 weeks or 4 weeks or 6 months or whatever it is. So we want them to feel empowered to do both really, really well.
It's also it sounds like a balance of keeping the platform simple and straightforward, that people don't have to do a lot of work to use it, but they still have the abilities to customize to the granular level when it comes to that communication. Now, this is not the first company that you've led.
True.
Yeah, you have a track record of a couple different things. But from What If Sports, interesting sports simulation technology, and Insignia, if I say that right. Insignia, yes, Insignia. Yes. If you look over your multiple business years of experience and you start to pull out, because I mentioned earlier, we have a lot of business leaders and founders and entrepreneurs that listen. When it comes to building a company, if you go back to yourself and tell yourself 10, 20 years ago what you know now on building successful business and SaaS business, what's a key nugget for you?
I think there's so many. I mean, you could do an entire episode on all the mistakes I've made and things I've learned. It really is, people are your business. It is your people. So oftentimes entrepreneurs will mistake the product or the service as the most important thing, or they'll mistake the customer as the most important thing. It's not, it's your people. And you need people that are passionate about changing the world and driving value, and that love what they do, love to work hard, love to solve problems, love to collaborate. There's a skill set that I have found to be very, very successful. One of the other things I would tell myself, so if I was talking to me when I started my first business at 27, 28, I would tell myself, drop the ego. Ego is a killer. Ego is a killer personally. It's a killer professionally. It stands in the way of innovation. It's all about how you look. It prevents you from taking risk because you're afraid to fail. Ego is the worst thing for an entrepreneur.
Do you think you'd recognize you had ego if you had it? or would you assume it's just natural? Like, what's a sign that you're like, oh, I might have a little too much here?
My favorite line for that is, I'm the most humble person I know. Right? That is, I don't know if you would recognize it or not, but it is an ongoing thing, because society teaches us the exact opposite. Society, with friends, family, you go to school, it is about fitting in. It is about not standing out. It is about not drawing attention to yourself. It is about failure is bad. Don't ask questions. All those things are ego driven. Mm-hmm. And I would say, okay, if I actually did those things, my best case scenario is I am right in the middle of the bell curve. I am the most average person you could ever meet. No person in the middle of the bell curve has ever changed the world. So you have to ask yourself a question. Why are you on this earth? What are you here to do? And if it is change the world, you can't have ego and get there. You just can't. If it is, I just want to fit in, cool, you're going to be in the middle of the bell curve, but you're not going to do anything of note. The people on both ends of that bell curve are the ones that change the world. And I'm not just talking about technology. You can apply that to anyone, right? So Martin Luther King, he's not in the middle of the bell curve. He wanted to change the world. And you put yourself out there and you get people putting you down, threatening your life. Everyone who has changed the world is out here. None of them are sitting in the middle, and ego pushes you to the middle. So that would definitely be a piece of advice. I wish I would have figured this out years ago, but better late than never.
Yes. Yeah. You mentioned that how important then that team is. How big is the team today?
I think we're 45. I mean, we're just hiring like crazy. And we should be around 55 or 60, hopefully by the end of the year.
Wow. When it comes to hiring, because I know also for those who are in communication and HR and different things, that also a big role. Is there any key things or tools or tactics you found to hire the right people or make sure that they're the right fit for both your company and the role?
That is really difficult. Great question. One of the things that I learned early on is that when you're first getting started, the more known quantities you can surround yourself with, so people you've worked with in the past, people that you trust, people that you know or know 1 degree removed, yes, come with me. Oftentimes, the skill set you need to survive at the beginning is not the same skill set you need to grow. But at the beginning, it is all about survival. You need people that really are adaptable and flexible and like to solve problems and have empathy. That is how you survive. We will figure it out. And that skill set can play a role, but we're actually going through this now where we're really trying to transition away from that mindset to become really world-class at the things that drive the most value within the business. So I don't want to be okay at lots of things. I want to be amazing at a few things. And that is how you mature as a company. That's really, I think, where we are really focused on maturation, being amazing at the things we choose to be amazing at. But getting back to people, I think there's really 2 different answers to that question. One is, who do you hire when you're first getting started? And the second is, how do you grow your team and then maintain your culture? And that is also extremely difficult. And so a lot of that is really just doing the legwork up front and really, I think, over communicating to potential new hires. This is who we are. This is how it's going to feel. You need to come in and ask questions, and you need to be okay with challenging things. And that's how we innovate. And these are more than words. This is really how it's going to feel to you. And the more we can impress upon them what you're walking into, that will either attract them or push them away. Oh, I actually don't want to be in that type of environment. And that's okay. So we want people that do really value being in that type of culture.
For you, with your team that's growing and lots of exciting things, looking ahead to the future, both for you, but also the industry of internal communications. What do you see the future looking like in the next 2, 3, 4 years?
It's evolving rapidly, which is really exciting. I think within the next 3 or 4 years, you're going to really see what we've talked about, which is how we treat our consumers, really be taken and embraced by these organizations. I think because of COVID, I think because of this labor shortage that we're in, right? There is a talent shortage. It's hard to find people. For most companies, people are their biggest expense, right? And it shouldn't even be viewed as an expense. It's your biggest asset. So I think people are starting to realize, and when I say people, I mean leadership of these large organizations are really starting to realize investing in your people is the best investment you can make. And so if there are tools and technologies like what we offer that can make them feel more valued, great. I think you're going to see that really explode over the next 3 years.
Wow, being a tool that one could use. If you want to check out Cerkl, it is cerkl.com, cerkl.com. You'll be able to request a demo, explore it. Thank you so much, Tarek. It's good to have you on and share your journey.
Great questions. I appreciate the conversation. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. And we'll see you all on the next episode of UpTech Report. Have you seen a company using AI, machine learning, or other technology to transform the way we live, work, and do business? Go to uptechreport.com and let us know.